Hey LAN party gamers! Today we're going to do an upgrade on my personal rig. This is Little Green. Now you probably remember us building Little Green when the 1080 Ti's came out, as it's got two 1080 Ti's in SLI, 32 gigs of DDR4 and a 7700K. All the best stuff I could get at the time. Now this stuff is obviously aged gracefully, as it's only been about a year, and even with the RTX lines of video cards coming out, this is still a major workhorse. So going to events and stuff, I always want to show it off and bring it with me, but this case that we picked out, mostly because it fit the parts that I wanted, and it was green, which matched the color scheme that we were going, which was an all green theme. Well, I've never been in love with this case. It was a budget case to begin with, and basically I picked it out because I didn't really have anything better to choose from. This is something, though, that I was waiting for. This is the Cerberous from Slager, and unlike my old case here, which measures around 16 inches cubed, this thing only measures 14 in one dimension, which is almost the same, but it's only 12.5 inches tall, so just over a foot tall, and only 7 inches wide from the outside panel to the outside panel, making this nearly half as big as a volume as the old case. Meaning I'll be able to fit this on trips when I want to travel to DreamHack or I want to go to QuakeCon. This should be able to go in an overhead bin, no problem, or even fit in our brand new LAN Party backpack from Crazy Gear. If you haven't seen the LAN Party backpack video or the video where we built Little Green originally, you can check those up right here. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to tear down Little Green to its base parts. We're going to give it a little bit of dusting because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of dust on this rig, and clean it out and then move it over to the Cerberous and see just how much it might have changed from temperatures if we've dropped in any FPS, but we shouldn't, because you can still do all-in-one water cooling in this rig and show off all your internals. This is, as far as I can find, the smallest case that you can still do SLI in, and we're going to be using, thanks to our great friends over at Silverstone, an 800 watt SFX power supply. I wanted to show off how far SFX power supplies, from the first ones that we've seen back when they started around 450 watts with my RVZ01 Raven case, till now here in the Cerberous with twin 1080 Ti's and SLI with an SFX power supply. It should be a sight to see all these parts put into this case, and we're going to have to find out exactly how we're going to cable manage and show off all the great green internals on this one case. And maybe there'll be a surprise here or two we'll have to sort out while we're at it. So we're excited to show you guys the smallest SLI case we could find, and big shout out to the people down there at Slager. They sent this to us, and they even did a custom in laser etching on the back side of the SDL logo. So that's fantastic. Thanks a lot, guys, and let's get to building. Okay, so the first thing that we had to do was take apart old Little Green, or I guess is what I don't know what I'm gonna call it now, but basically the cube case, and get all of the parts out, because we're not changing any of the parts other than the case itself. So we tore it down and we took out everything. The only parts we're not keeping are the fans and the power supply. So those are either staying with the case, or we had to use them in another project. Noting that, though, the reason why we haven't been able to use the fans from this is because this is so much smaller. We took two of our 15mm, 120mm fans from Silverstone and mounted them up top as exhaust, as well as I think it's an 80 or 92mm fan on the rear as exhaust as well. Those are mounted straight to the motherboard, so we can actually control their speed. And what we had to wait for in order to get the dual 120mm radiator to fit on the bottom was a set of Noctua 120mm by 15mm fans. They sit here at the bottom, bringing cool air past the radiator and over all the components before it gets expelled up the top and rear. One interesting thing I note about this case is that the entire side panel is a piece of plexiglass. It's not a piece of plexiglass fit into a piece of metal or steel. it's actually painted plexiglass. So it's actually fairly malleable. You can actually pop it off without worrying about the plexiglass falling out. I do like this better for travel than using a glass side panel because I'm not worried so much about something hitting it and cracking it. It's got a little bit of give, although you lose a little bit of sheen from not using actual glass, but that's okay. I actually prefer it this way, especially since I plan on traveling with this particular case. The side panels are interchangeable as far as left and right, up and down. The top piece obviously is not, because it uses these peg pieces, and that's where your buttons for your USB 3 and your on-off switch as well as your LED indicator are. They've taken out the front headphone and microphone jacks in the current versions of these cases. I guess that it's so small they expect you to be able to plug into the rear, so that's not going to be an issue because it is such a small case you can pretty easily access all the rear I/O. Now, going to the back of the case, one thing we noticed is that the panel that we have this 92mm fan plugged into is removable. You can actually fit a full ATX case from the old case into this new one. That is a panel that you put in here with the spots for the power cable, which they have an extension cable that runs all along the top of the motherboard and actually plugs into where the new power supply is, which is in the front. That gives us room here for a view. It allows us to show off our CPU cooler, our RAM and whatnot without all the cables going in front of everything we have here. Another thing about the rear panel is that everything is, regardless if it's plastic or it's metal, has the same kind of matte finish to it. It all feels the same, it all looks the same in pictures, and it's a really nice finish they use. I believe it's a powder coating for the entire case in and out. It gives it a real solid look to it, and it's very scratch resistant, which is really nice, again, because we plan on traveling with something so small, and that's really the point of the case. We're using 4 out of the 5 of these rear I/O shields here where the PCI cards go, and if you have a mATX case, the reason why they have 5 slots here, even though your motherboard only would have 4, is because sometimes the motherboard will have your video card being on that most bottom slot. And because of that, they've added a 5th PCI shield here, or an opening for a PCI card, that allows you to actually have your video card lower than your motherboard can go. Our motherboard, however, only takes up 4 slots, which is why our video cards are so close together, leaving some room for our radiator and our 2 Noctua fans. However, on our specific motherboard, the USB 3 header was in the way, and because all we have on the front are USB 3s, we couldn't get away with not using that header. So we had to go in with a Dremel and actually take out a little bit of the frame of our radiator. Didn't seem to hurt it at all. We're not using this side of the frame, and it's not causing any problems yet. So hopefully that stays the same, but I don't see us ever needing to flip the radiator over to use that part that we have cut into anytime soon. So like I said, we were able to mount those fans directly to the bottom of it through the bottom grill. Now, speaking of the grills on this case, they've done something interesting. Every area in which you could put a fan or a hard drive, they've put fan holes, and they're in such a way that they look nice, as they're offset holes that are elongated ovals. And unlike many cases like this one that have very specific spots where you only can put a fan here or you can only put a fan there, on this case, as long as you see this pattern, it's going to match some kind of fan hole. So that means if you have a fan that's only this big, well, you can pretty well be certain that you're going to get at least 2 or 3 of your fan screws in there in order for it to fit in some way in here. So we did that on the top. We used 2 screws each for our 120mm exit fans, and all 4 on the back for this rear exhaust fan as well. And that's how we were able to mount our radiator on the bottom. We were able to pick and choose which sets of holes we wanted to use on the bottom to make it fit. And this whole thing is about customization, and it's a really great feature that they put in there. You can tell a lot of effort and thought went into building this case. Now, speaking of the little things that you can tell they put a lot of work into, like those fan holes we just mentioned, I want to talk a little bit about the construction of the case. Now, the interior of the case, everything that the panels hook into is actually one solid piece. They lay it out. Once they've cut it, laser cut it, and CNC'd the whole thing to fit, to match, they use a bending device that actually bends the entire case into its cube form, and then the rivets and everything else that's used to hold it together like these friction brackets here that are actually, you pop in and out to get the side panels on, are added later. This unibody design means that this really rigid, it doesn't have a lot of flex to it. I'm not worried about it on a plane or what have you. And like I said, I keep telling people that this case specifically is for travel. And so with that design in mind, you can really get a sense that this is what they wanted too. And to be honest, we were looking for something that we could modify that's small, like a Dell case that we found on eBay for 19 bucks. It's only slightly smaller than this, but we would have to get it so much cut out of it. We'd have to make our own front panel and stuff that it just wasn't feasible. But you know what? We still have the case, so we might end up making a build out of it just for fun. But we would have to tap our own motherboard screws and find a power supply that fit it. So that's another job for another day. In the meanwhile, we have played some games on this. In fact, if you watched our Maker Faire video, which you should be able to see right up top, is we edited that whole thing on this rig as it stands now. So having the CPU turbo up to 4.7 gigahertz, using both video cards in this small case, hasn't yet been an issue. So we have done some preliminary testing on this, and I've got to say it's been working almost exactly the same as it would in this case, except that it's just way more portable. I can actually find a desk, whereas this big one here is about as wide as this one is tall. So being able to fit this behind a motherboard or being able to fit it up on a shelf or something is going to be far less of an issue than this big guy here. So Slager has done a great job in manufacturing this. The Cerberous case is something that, if you really want SLI or you really want expansion cards, but you want the smallest footprint possible, I can't think of a better case to recommend. This is something that I've been looking forward to for quite a while, and they really hit it out of the ballpark when they made this. You can find out more information about this case and some of the history of it down in the description below. This thing started out as a Kickstarter, and before that it was a discussion on I think a hard OCP forum before that, and just people putting their ideas out there of what they would like to see in a case, people funding it. Really a lot of effort and time went into something like this, and we're happy to see that it's come through, it's out now, and people can get their hands on it with a simple order form. So if you're looking for something like this, please be sure to check out their website. And if you like small case design, if you like small form factor or LAN party coverage, make sure you sign up on our subscription list here on YouTube. You can also find when we're going to be hosting LANs, maybe get a chance to see this thing up close and personal by going to our website, sandiegolan.net. Hopefully we'll see you there. Thanks for watching. Bye.